Hey, Jarek here, and back in 2004, I played Half-Life 2 to death. It's easy to forget how revolutionary and new Half-Life 2 was at the time. But back then I didn't care. I played it so many times that I memorized every little detail about the game. Not intentionally, mind you, I just played it a lot. So when Valve announced they're releasing episodes, I was ecstatic. I heard somewhere that episode 1 was coming out in late 2005, so I waited outside a GameStop before launch, what I thought was launch, and asked the first employee if I could buy episode 1. He looked at me like I was an alien. The game didn't come out till a year later. Point being, I was very excited for these episodes, but looking back on them now, episode 1 is typically forgotten. People talk about Blue Shift more than they talk about episode 1. In fact, if the conversation of the worst Half-Life game comes up, people will typically mention Blue Shift. Then when you mention episode 1, their response will be, no, it has to be Blue Shift. No, maybe you're right. People genuinely forget about this game. And that's kind of fair. It's an awkward middle game setting up the story for episode 2. Half-Life games have so many minor details to nerd about, and now you can play it in VR. Keep in mind this video is not about VR, I just wanted an excuse to play episode 1 and 2 with the new VR mod, and then realized I never made a video about these games. So if you don't care about VR, don't worry, this video isn't about VR at all, it's just about Half-Life episode 1. But first I have to mention the people that made this video possible, War Thunder, today's sponsor. War Thunder is an extremely comprehensive vehicle combat game. You can play more than 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships in combined arms battles against other players. If you're the type to nerd over historical battles and want to know every little detail about, say, a World War II tank, then this game might be for you, because every vehicle is incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components. And you can play War Thunder for free on PC, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and the previous console generation. Like I mentioned, there is a collection of vehicles in War Thunder that span over 100 years of development, from the 1920s to the present day. And there's an in-depth customization system for your vehicles. You can apply tons of different camouflages, place historical markings anywhere on your machines, and you can add bushes and general equipment. Something I particularly like about War Thunder is the damage you can do to other vehicles, or at least how it is presented to you. Part of my mind is still stuck in the early 2000s where racing games wouldn't do any damage to cars even if you crashed at 100 miles an hour, so seeing this level of detail is really amusing to me. Demolition is fun, so check the link down below in the video information to play this for free on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation. There's also a link down below in a pinned comment. If you register on PC using that link, there's even a large free bonus pack that includes multiple premium vehicles, a premium account, boosters, and much more. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and now let's go back to Half-Life 2 Episode 1. One of the reasons people frequently forget about Episode 1 is because of its length. It's only 5 chapters long. I beat it in under 3 hours while streaming, while talking to chat, while playing in VR. The first time you play through this expansion, you'll probably beat it in 2 hours, to be honest. This gives me a unique ability to talk about every chapter without this video being an hour long. In fact, it might not even end up being 10 minutes long. That's how short this game is. Chapter 1, Undue Alarm. This is basically just an intro. You were found in a pile of rubble, you make contact with Eli and Kleiner, you discuss that the Citadel's core is about to go critical, and you make the decision to break into the Citadel to contain the core. Side note, if you don't have your VR legs, this is going to feel real weird. Chapter 2, Direct Intervention. This chapter is notable for some smaller, interesting things. For example, it's the first time you quote-unquote battle with these stalkers. Now I say battle with quotation marks because stalkers were changed quite a bit through Half-Life 2's development. I remember seeing a lot of early footage where stalkers were a lot more agile. In fact, Mark Laidlaw talked about what the stalkers were originally going to be. Mark Laidlaw expanded on the enemy's origins, remarking that stalkers were one of the earliest creatures put into Half-Life 2, and the developers tried them in several gameplay environments. Initially, they were foes that crouched down in the dark and followed players from behind, surprising them when they turned around. While Valve had numerous gameplay concepts for them, such as stalkers being used in puzzles where they could cut through sheet metal with their beams, they ultimately didn't end up being fun. As these sequences were scripted and stagey, they decided to aim for an emotional impact instead, and make stalkers an important story element. And that they sure did.
You know, all things considered, we're not... Oh no. It's a stalker car. Damn the Combine. This is what happens to you if you resist. Or if you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. God, I hope you don't remember who you were.
Part of me is disappointed by this. Stalkers aren't really interesting as an enemy, at least as far as combat is concerned, but within the lore, they're very interesting. And it leads to moments like this. Anyway, in the big picture, the whole point of this chapter is just to contain the core to buy you some time so you can escape the city. Does that really justify spending more time inside of the Citadel even though you just spent the last chapter of Half-Life 2 in there? I don't really know. It's not really a chapter I feel like going out of my way to play personally. A very important story element does happen though. After you contain the core, you get to watch that message from Judith Mossman. You download the message yourself, and then the Combine hound you all the way through episode 1 and episode 2. So yeah, this was pretty important. But from my perspective, the most interesting thing about this message was seeing the Hunter at the end. Keep in mind, we didn't actually get to fight a Hunter or see it again until episode 2, which didn't come out for a year after episode 1. In fact, this Hunter isn't even the same model they used in episode 2. So the point of the message is that it's supposed to leave more questions than answers, but it also did so in a gameplay sense as well, which is pretty smart by Valve. Chapter 3, Lowlife. You tried to escape on a train, the train crashed, and now you're stuck underground fighting zombies in the dark for the next 30 minutes. You also fight some antlions occasionally, where you plug up their burrows so they stop spawning constantly. Does anyone actually like fighting antlions? They're not annoying enough to make me stop playing the game, but they're annoying enough to make me never want to fight them. I'm pretty sure Valve knew this because they changed them somewhat drastically in Alex, and they are actually quite fun to fight in Alex. Anyway, story-wise, nothing really happens in this chapter, you're just trying to escape. Gameplay-wise, a few things do happen though. You get introduced to a new enemy.
That's like a zombine, right? Zombine, get it? Okay.
This is great because it adds some variation to the zombies. Previously, most of them would just run at you and hit you. The Zombine are a bit tankier and have the ability to become a kamikaze out of nowhere. To be honest, this is the same thing Gearbox learned in Opposing Force. So I guess you could say they did it first. God, I don't want to say that. The second thing that's important about Lowlife is that Alex becomes a true partner in crime. Now, Alex was always sort of your partner in crime in Half-Life 2, but more for story elements. She was just kind of there because she needed to be. The easiest way to get a player connected to a character in a game is to turn them into a useful ally in combat. That's what they'll be doing for most of the game. Turning Alex into a useful combatant makes her more involved in this long trek throughout the entire game. She's no longer just an NPC that is there to make the next cutscene happen. She is Alex, Gordon Freeman's sidekick. And maybe more depending on who you ask. Let's not get into fan theories. But yeah, chapter 3 is just getting the chapter 4, Urban Flight, up at the surface. To be honest, Urban Flight is where this game feels like it really starts. You can see the destruction the Striders have had on the city, and you're finally moving towards evacuating City 17. To me, this is the only chapter that feels on par with the base game, and sometimes it's even better. For example, this chopper gunner fight. It's almost like they took a page out of Battlefield. Every wall and ceiling and floor is breakable, and when you finally do kill it, it collapses right in front of you. This was a fun take on an enemy that we already knew, and a neat little mini-boss. But then there's the highlight of the entire expansion. The hospital fight. This is the part everyone remembers, and Alex becomes even more of a badass here.
So much for medical supplies. I found a shotgun.
She picks up a shotgun and can really hold her own. She can kill basically anything in front of her. I don't actually have much more to say about this hospital. It's just incredibly polished. There's really good pacing between the combat and the puzzles. Also, it has some really good new music that we hadn't heard before. Oh, also, chapter 4 is where you finally get the crowbar. You spent about 75% of this game without it, having to use the gravity gun to break every box. This is by far the longest you go in a Half-Life game without the crowbar, unless the Half-Life game didn't have a crowbar and is still an official Half-Life game. I see all of you down there typing in Opposing Force, and no, fan games don't count. But right after that awesome hospital combat section is chapter 5, Exit City 17. And to be honest, this chapter kind of sucks. This chapter is just 2 areas, one of which you go back and forth over and over. You have to escort 4 different citizens at a time. This makes no sense. Wouldn't it make more sense to have Gordon scout forward, check to see if it's safe, then send everyone at once? I mean, you're trying to leave as soon as you can. Why waste more time? More importantly, it's just not fun. A lot of the reason Half-Life games are so fun is because it feels like you're constantly moving forward. So backtracking 4 different times is not my idea of fun. Now, Valve has done defense sections before and they did work, but this is a little different. This is also where you finally get the revolver, which is weirdly late. This is the last battle you're really using it in. You did get the crossbow before this, so that was your ranged weapon. However, in VR using the crossbow is a little more difficult. You do actually have to use the scope. No scoping is a genuine accomplishment in VR. So it's less point and click, it's something you do have to use, which is really fun, don't get me wrong, but the revolver helps a lot. If you're not playing in VR, well, then it's basically just a hit scan sniper that you can fire from the hip. It's still very good. So again, it's just weird you get it this late. After you escort all these civilians, you're finally at the train yard. Fun fact, this is the last time you ever see Barney in the entire Half-Life franchise. He is never mentioned nor seen in episode 2. Once Barney takes off, you get to the final boss, Strider, the enemy I have killed many times over in the base game. This is really underwhelming, especially because the Strider boss is really scripted and honestly not very fun. If anything, it's more annoying than anything else. I've seen a lot of people that don't play video games as much struggle here, even on normal difficulty. Something about it just isn't as polished as Valve's normal quality. And also, again, this is supposed to be the final boss. It's just really underwhelming. At least once you get on the train and finally start leaving the city, the explosion's really cool, and then it leads to another cliffhanger. Now, as you can tell, I'm not thrilled on episode 1. I don't hate it, and I probably sound a lot more negative than I mean to. It's more forgettable than anything else. If I had to list an official Half-Life game that was the worst one, it was definitely episode 1. Not because it's bad, but again, just because it's forgettable. Its whole purpose is to fill plot holes made between Half-Life 2 and episode 2. It's the awkward middle game. This problem isn't really unique to Half-Life 2, but it stands out a lot here. Thankfully, Valve released episode 2 a year later, along with the orange box, which is probably Valve's peak. So that's what next video will be about. Big thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Again, check out that link down below in the video information or the pinned comment to play this game for free on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation. And if you register using that link on PC, be sure to get your premium content. Big thanks to my YouTube members, they can see my videos early. If you want to become a YouTube member, click that join button right there. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like my other stuff. You've been here to the end, so be sure to subscribe. Big thanks to those of you that joined me over on Twitch while I streamed this. Streaming VR is a little bit of a pain, but I think it's worth it to hang out with you guys. My Twitch is over there, and if you want to go follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is down over there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.